unidentified flying objects. They're typically appearing as little creatures. Again, a good explanation is the leprechauns or the fairies that people were experiencing.
Can you explain occult to people who aren't familiar?
Well,
I always say occult, by the way. I don't know if am I pronouncing that wrong?
no, it's occult, O-C-C-U-L-T. It's basically tools that people develop to try to contact extraterrestrial beings. Like a Ouija board to try to contact an angelic being, seances, astrology. These are examples. And these are things that the Bible explicitly forbids. It's like, hey, you want a supernatural encounter? Don't go to these angels. Come to me. And
don't go to these angels.
Well, the Bible tells us there's two categories of angels, the righteous angels and the fallen angels. And the Bible warns us the fallen angels are out to harm you. They're out to deceive you.
How'd they fall?
Well, they rebelled against God, just like Adam and Eve rebelled against God.
So they're not humans.
They're not humans. They're angels.
They're angels, so they're supernatural, and they're supposed to emanate from a place, allegedly, where none of this, you said it way better than I'll say it earlier, but like none of these laws apply. None of these, we don't have to be in families and stuff like that. So how could they fall? I don't understand. Like, aren't they above falling?
Well, they fell spiritually. We're not talking a physical fall, a spiritual fall.
Yeah, I know.
Where they said, hey, we know God created us, but we don't want to submit to him anymore. It was Satan who said, I want to be like the Most High. I want to be the one in charge. And so he rebelled against God, and it tells us that he led a third of the angels in rebellion with him. And so they're in a battle with God and the righteous angels. But their target is to deceive as many human beings as possible. And their strategy is, we're going to offer humans power in return for truth. We're going to take truth away from them, but we're going to give them power. He says, these humans, they're suckers for power. They all want power. And so that's kind of their strategy. And that's why they appear in these forms saying, hey, we can give you advanced technology. We can help you with your problems. But you do pay a price. There is deception.
So why would, surprised this didn't come up earlier, but like why would God create supernatural angels under, I guess, similar constraints, or at least on the same wavelength type constraints as he does humans, where they have the will to not be an angel anymore? Do we have a good explanation for that?
Well, we talked about this earlier. He created us human beings with strong free will so that strong love would be possible. God wanted strong love relationships with his creation. He had the same goal for the angels. He wants strong love relationships with the angels, which means he granted them strong free will. And he knew ahead of time some of them would use their free will to rebel against him. But it's like, hey, I want strong love. I'm willing to have this happen, where some choose not to relate to me. He gives the angels the same choice he gives to us human beings. We can spend eternity with him or eternity without him.
So do you think that, I'm trying to put together everything you're saying, so correct me if I'm making some of the wrong leaps here, but you're referring to the fact that there seems to be an overwhelming negativity as a result of these quote-unquote events that happen, which is alluding to the fact that they're fallen angels who are doing this, not angels. So you don't think angels have ever, if this is the case, been responsible for the phenomenon as we know it? Like there's never been a sighting where, you walk by and there's a giant crater or something and something was there and you can't find anything and it was actually an angel as opposed to a fallen angel.
Well, the distinction is righteous angels versus fallen angels. And we see in the book of Hebrews a statement referring to Christians. Many of you have entertained the righteous angels unawares. And so God will allow the righteous angels to momentarily assist Christians in their ministries. And you see that in the book of Acts, where an angel opens the jail for Peter, and Peter walks out, and the angel disappears. And it says, many of you have had these experiences that didn't even notice it because it was so momentary. But here we're talking about the fallen angels, the angels that are in opposition to God. And I think what is significant, and I saw this when I was in Russia, is where you see people deeply involved in the occult and trying to gain these supernatural powers, that's where you see a very high incidence of UFO events. So, and you even see that here in America. There's certain states where we see a higher rate of experiences of UFOs than you do in other states. But it's proportional to the percentage of the population that's involved in the occult. And the Bible tells us these evil angels, they need permission. They cannot touch you unless you give them permission. And you give them permission through your occult experiences. So the book we wrote, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, we say it's a scientifically testable explanation of UFOs. Get rid of all the occult in your life, that'll be the end of your UFO experiences. Begin to pursue the occult, don't be surprised if it happens, and notice how frequently the UFO phenomena repeats. So it's like certain individuals have repeated UFO encounters, but these are the individuals that are very much into the occult. Take that out of your life. And again, I'm not alone. These physicists who've devoted 10 years plus to studying the phenomena, they draw the same conclusions. They say, we're not sure.
Who are those physicists?
Well, people like Jacques Vallée.
Yeah, you mentioned him. But
and I forget the 5 others are in our book. But we quote them too in what they write. They say, well, we're not exactly sure who's responsible for this UFO phenomena, but whatever it is, it's a one-to-one correspondence to demonology. So they say whatever's behind the demonic phenomena is also behind the UFO phenomena. And these are people who are not Christians. They're not even believers in God at all, but they say we can't deny this one-to-one correspondence.
I mean, you said one of the names of your book is like The Little Green Men or something
Lights
like that?
in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Yeah, so how do you explain, are like the little green men little devil angels, or?
Well, I'm making the point that if you go back deep in history, thousands of years ago, they're not appearing as unidentified flying objects. They're typically appearing as little creatures. Again, a good explanation is the leprechauns or the fairies that people were experiencing. Again, they're adapting to our technology and our culture. And so until the invention of the aircraft, until they had these blimps in the sky, they weren't appearing that way.
Right. How do you explain some of the nuclear encounters, though? And for a little background on that, that's another thing that I discussed a lot with James Fox when he was in here. But, James is like, I'm not sure there's a better historian of the post-World War II phenomenon than James. I mean, his movie, The Phenomenon, I may be a little biased, but I think it's probably the best UFO documentary ever made. It goes through that history as beautifully as anything I've ever seen. But there are so many sightings that occurred, not just in the United States, but around the world, in Russia, where you talked about the occult and stuff like that, that involve nuclear bases and military personnel. And they will watch their nuclear triggers get fucked with, and things will change. They'll either turn on or turn off. And they've discussed how it's like, I think, what was the guy's name, Alessi? The old guy who took Bob, it was the intro to 138. I probably already played it in this episode. But Bob Salas, that's it. Bob Salas, who was on a base in America, who purports some of these sightings, he talks about it. It was almost like they were taking matches out of the hands of a baby. Because in the post-World War II world, after we reached the nuke and used it twice on Japan, which was definitely excessive, but that's neither here nor there, it's almost like that unlocked this thing where humanity could destroy itself, which is a real biblical type idea, by the way. But these beings start appearing on these bases to take away, to tell us they're stopping our ability to do that. That was reported so much, and if that pattern isn't even somewhat true, that would seem to be a very positive one to me. So is that angels?
Well, I don't see a lot of that in the UFO literature. I mean, I've read those kinds of stories, but it's like I'm not seeing the documentation. What they do document is that the most common appearance of a UFO is 3 a.m. in the morning on lonely country roads, which I find fascinating because guess what? That's where our telescopes are. It's we astronomers who spend a lot of time at 3 a.m. in the morning on lonely country roads trying to observe the heavens. And yet, what I document in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, observational astronomers have one of the lowest incidents of UFO encounters. Although I do know of 2 astronomers who would come on the telescope for 3 or 4 hours a year, and almost every time they had a UFO encounter. Meanwhile, I'm logging 1,500 hours a year. I never have an encounter. 2 of my fellow graduate students likewise were logging about 1,500 hours a year. We never saw a thing. I said, well, I know the difference. The 3 of us, we're not involved in the occult. Those 2, we know are deeply involved. And so they were seeing it virtually every time.
You knew they were deeply involved with it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they didn't make any bones about it. So they were because they were saying, we're scientists, we're trying to gain power. And I said, well, what are you guys doing? It's like, oh, yeah, they're trying to call up demons.
But is that the intention, though? They're not trying to call demons.
No, they want the power.
Some people can, but...
Well, I mean, I even saw that at Caltech, especially saw it when I was in the Soviet Union. They got fascinated by things floating in midair and they were doing quite physics research. And I says, yeah, it only happens to the physicists that are involved in the occult. We don't see spoons floating in midair, but they do. And I remember, too, in our church, there was a couple that just purchased a home. And they said there's one room that's colder than all the other rooms. And it's a room where pencils and spoons float in midair. And we think that there's a demon here. We think there's something messing this place up. And I said, well, that can only happen if the previous owners left behind an occult article. We need to find it and get rid of it. I said, we've already searched the house. We found nothing. I says, well, let's bring a team over. And so we prayed for about 30 minutes that God would help us find the article. And they said, we've searched the whole house. And I said, what about the basement? We've searched that too. What about the garage? He says, take me to the garage. Went into the garage, and I saw rafters with a pile of junk lumber on top of the rafters. He says, have you gone through that junk lumber? No, we haven't. We hauled all the junk lumber down. In the middle of it was an astrological forecaster. We went back into the room that was colder than the other rooms. You could see a faint octagonal outline on one wall. It was the exact same size as this astrological forecaster. We destroyed it. The room temperature went back to normal. No more floating objects in the room.
Right away.
Right away. And
just by destroying it.
Just by destroying that one item, it was all gone.
Which is a supernatural occurrence because that violates certain laws.
Yes. But if you got angels, they're not subject to the laws of physics.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.